All right, folks, continuing with our update here from Plain Fun RC regarding the 40% ACR Composites ARC Race Pond Racer. You can see we have our composite carbon fiber in place on the top. Remember, we're looking at the pod upside down here. This is the bottom, there's the top, okay? So that one in place, and this one we wound up using 30-minute epoxy. I ran out of the 120. It's fine. It's still the same brand that we wound up using, which is Loctite. I will say the 120 is a little nicer for the composite portion of it in terms of how it goes on, but it's fine. You just put a little bit of 70% rubbing alcohol in there, mixing just a little bit, and then of course mixing up, and then brush it right on. About the thickness, a little bit thicker than house paint is what I like to say. So that's one pod. The other pod is over here. Here's the one where we use the 120 on it, and you can see that's still drying and everything. So this is going to take a couple days for it to fully cure before we can go ahead and start cutting. So we'll give that probably about 2 days or so and see where we are. In the interim, we'll go ahead and we'll work on getting the battery tray together and in place. And then it's just a waiting game from that point onward until this dries. All right, more to come. All right, folks, welcome back to the Plain Fun RC channel as we continue our update on the ACR Composites ARC Race 40% Rutan Pond Racer. So let's talk about what you're seeing right here. So when you get the plane, particularly if you get the kit version, the blind nuts are not put in the center fuselage or the wing, and you need the blind nuts put in order to hold the wing in place. Right now we've got these are 6mm, by the way. So 6mm blind nut, 6mm hex screw, as you can see. Now this is very important. I'll show you in greater detail in a second. When you get the blind nut, the wood that's here is not thick enough for the blind nut at all. So it's very important that when you go and to put in the blind nut, you've got to use 1/4-inch plywood. You got to sink it into 1/4-inch plywood first, then glue it into place, and then screw it into place so it pulls the blind nut through. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so you can see there is our 6mm blind nut, 1/4-inch ply, and you can see how what I've done is I've drilled the hole out. I've drilled it using a what is it? 5/16. That's the missing hole. 5/16 is what you're going to need to drill the hole out with. Now, as far as placement is concerned, what you'll need to do is when you cut, you'll need to sort of eye the piece in relation to the wing and to the center fuselage, and then cut it out, and then put the piece inside. So it would be sitting behind this piece of wood here, and then draw a circle where you see that hole. Draw a circle and then drill it out there, and that will give you the exact spot of where the blind nut needs to be. But once again, as I said, please do not put the blind nut directly in here. It'll stick out way too much, and you won't be able to properly secure the wing or the center fuselage to the pods themselves. So that's very important, very important. I cannot stress that enough. When you put it through the 1/4-inch ply plus this, only a very, very, very small amount, maybe like 1mm at the most, actually sticks out. Millimeter of the blind nut actually sticks out, and that's fine because you can see here the actual portion here for the pod that is relatively thick, so that's not going to affect how well the hex screw here holds that in. Now you might be saying, well, why do you have all these washers on there? Well, what I want to do is when I mount this on here, I want to make sure I pull that blind nut so it sits very flat and very flush on the back. And as you can see, we already have a little bit sticking out here on this end. And if I just use a regular washer, it's not gonna pull all the way through. It's gonna wind up hitting the washer and stopping. So I've layered a couple large washers, fender washers, what we call them, and that will then give me the space needed so I can pull that blind nut all the way through so it sits nice and flush. Now I'm just using 5-minute epoxy to hold this in place, which is more than sufficient, but I wanted to make sure that you knew that because it's extremely important that you set this up in that exact way Otherwise, as I mentioned a second ago, you will not be able to properly secure the fuselage or the center or the wing to the pods. So very important. All right. Okay. And I'll show you the finished product in a little bit. All right, folks, just continuing with our installation of the blind nuts here in the wing and also the center fuselage. So you can see the end result right here. It came out just right. You can see how it does stick out just a little bit here, but that's manageable because, as I mentioned before, there is the thickness there with regards to the actual pod itself, so I'm not too concerned about that part. But you can really see the importance, though, of why you must first put it in that 1/4 inch plywood before you go through and install here on the wing. So that part's done. Gonna let that dry overnight, and then tomorrow we'll do a little test fit, make sure everything fits well together, and then at that point we'll move on to the hatch. More to come.